Hey there, it's Zeb. In this video, I'm going to talk about changes in demand and the supply and demand model. We'll talk about the factors that cause changes in demand, and we'll talk about what that looks like. So, first of all, let's look at what changes in demand look like on a graph. So we'll start with a supply and demand graph. So we've got quantity on the horizontal axis, price on the vertical. There's our supply curve, upward sloping. And our demand curve is downward sloping to the right. And so we've got here an equilibrium quantity, call it Q star, and an equilibrium price, P star. Now, an increase in demand means that at every possible price, buyers want to buy more units for whatever reason. And so we can think about this as being a rightward shift of the demand curve. So we'll call this D prime. So we've shifted our original demand curve to the right. Well, that moves our equilibrium from this original equilibrium up to the new equilibrium. And at this new equilibrium, this is going to be the quantity, Q star. That's how many units get bought and sold in the market. And we expect the market price to rise to P prime. So we see the equilibrium quantities going up and the equilibrium price is going up as well. For whatever reason, if we were to get a decrease in demand, then that means that at every possible price, buyers want to buy less than they did before. And again, for whatever reason, it doesn't matter, but we know that that's going to shift the demand curve this way, to the left. So we get D double prime. The equilibrium quantity falls to Q double prime, so less is bought and sold. And the market price falls to P double prime. All right, so an increase in demand causes more to be bought and sold and a higher price, whereas a decrease in demand causes less to be bought and sold and an overall lower price in the market. So let's think about the factors that would cause this to happen. So we're going to call those factors the determinants of demand. And we will briefly touch on some of those determinants. And the reason why they're called determinants is because they determine where the demand curve sits in the price quantity space. That is where it sits on the graph. So what are some of the factors that affect how much buyers want to buy? Well, one factor is going to be just the tastes and preferences that buyers have. So tastes and preferences. If buyers decide that they like something more, their demand's going to go up, other things being equal. If they decide that they like something less, their demand was going to fall. Again, all of this is other things being equal or ceteris paribus. If other things are changing at the same time, then that may not hold. But assuming nothing else is changing, then that should be true. Another determinant is going to be the income of buyers. And now with income, you've got to be a little bit careful because you can have two types of goods. You can have what we call a normal good, or you can have what we call an inferior good. And normal goods are goods that as our income goes up, we want to buy more of them, so our demand rises. For me, that would be steak and lobster. Right? Whereas inferior goods are goods that as our income goes up, we want to buy less of those things. So for me, that would be ramen noodles. That's an entirely subjective thing too, by the way. What's normal for one person may be inferior for another simply because values are subjective. Okay, another one is going to be the number of buyers in the market. If you have more buyers, other things being equal, you're going to have a greater demand than if you have fewer buyers in that market. Another is going to be the expectations of buyers with respect to the future price of the product or service. So if buyers think that the price of this good or service is going to go up in the future, and it's something that they may that they are thinking about buying, right, then they may be more inclined to want to buy today. This is going to cause demand to go up, which actually will cause prices to start to rise. If, on the other hand, they think the price is going to fall in the future, and it's a good or service that they can hold off on buying, they don't have to buy it right away, this will cause demand for the good or service today to fall, which will cause the price of the good or service to fall as well. And then the fifth determinant of demand is going to be the price of not the good itself, but of related goods and services. And so here we have to be a little careful too, because there are two types of related goods and services. There are what we call substitutes. Substitutes are goods that are used interchangeably. So for instance, Coke and Pepsi are substitutes. If the price of Coca-Cola rises, we would expect to see people buying less Coca-Cola, that is, the quantity demanded of Coca-Cola falls, and some of those people are going to shift into buying Pepsi, specifically the people that are indifferent, right? So at the old price, if I'm kind of indifferent between drinking Coke and Pepsi, and the price of Coke goes up, I'm likely to shift into buying Pepsi. So demand for Pepsi is going to rise. On the other hand, if I'm indifferent between Coke and Pepsi, right, and the price of Coca-Cola falls, then we might see the demand for Pepsi fall as people are going to shift out of buying Pepsi and into drinking Coca-Cola. So substitutes work that way, and the other type of related goods are what we call complements. And complements are goods that are used together. Rather than being used interchangeably, these are goods that go hand in hand. They're jointly used or they're jointly consumed in some way. So for instance, if you are baking a cake, you need both flour and eggs, let's just say. And these two go hand in hand if you're a baker. And so if the price of flour goes up, then possibly you are baking fewer cakes, and so your demand for eggs may fall. So we would expect to see complements working in opposite directions. If the price of one goes up, demand for the other goes down. And if the price of one goes down, demand for the other goes up. Whereas with substitutes, they work in the same direction. So these are the determinants of demand. These are the factors that will cause the demand curve to shift. Notice, what is absent from this list is the price of the good or service itself. Now we have expectations about the price in the future, and we have prices of other goods. That can affect the demand curve for our product or service today. But what will not affect it is the price of the good itself. So price of good itself does not cause a change in the demand curve. It doesn't determine where the demand curve sits. And the reason for that is because price is already graphed on the vertical axis. So that is not a determinant of demand, but rather a determinant of quantity demanded. So a change in price is not going to cause a change in the demand curve. It's not going to cause the demand curve to shift, but it may cause movement along the demand curve. So for instance, I'll just draw a small demand curve here. Here's our demand curve. At this price, P1, we see that buyers want to buy Q1. And if we change the price to P2, we see now buyers want to buy Q2. So a change in price just causes movement along the demand curve, whereas a change in one of the determinants of demand is going to cause a change in the entire curve. It's going to shift the entire curve. So let's think really quickly about how we move from one equilibrium to another. So we saw that if we start out at this original equilibrium in this top graph at P star Q star, and demand increases, we move from point A to, we'll call this point B. So how does that work? Well, initially what happens is that the price stays the same. The price is P star, and as demand increases, buyers now want to buy more. right? So at that price P star, now buyers want to buy this. So we'll call this B prime. So at this old price, sellers want to sell Q star, but buyers want to buy whatever this quantity is. We'll call it Q prime D, the quantity demanded by buyers. So we have a classic shortage here. The quantity supplied is less than the quantity demanded. And what happens is when you have a shortage, buyers start trying to outbid each other to get this product. And so as a result, prices start to rise. And as the price starts to rise, buyers want to buy less. And so they start moving up along the demand curve, buying less and less and less until the price gets to P prime. Now, at the same time that that's happening, sellers, as the price is rising, sellers want to sell more. And they're going to sell more until the price gets to P prime. And once you get to the price P prime, now buyers want to buy the same amount that sellers want to sell. So again, we reach an equilibrium. Notice what happens if we get the decrease in demand. So we start out at point A, and we know we are going to wind up at a new equilibrium, and we'll call that point C. What happens is that initially, when we get the decrease in demand, at that old price, P star, buyers want to buy QD double prime. So buyers want to buy less, and sellers at this price still want to sell Q double star. So the quantity supplied here is greater than the quantity demanded. So we have a surplus because sellers want to sell more than buyers want to buy. And so here, sellers are trying to outcompete each other to get buyers to buy their product. And the way to do that is by lowering your price. And so everyone starts lowering price, prices start to fall in the market. And as the price starts to fall, of course, sellers want to sell less, so they're going to move along the supply curve in this direction, selling less as the price falls. And while that price is falling, buyers want to buy more, so they're going to be moving along their demand curve this direction until price stops at P double prime. There you've reached the new equilibrium. So notice, increases in demand cause temporary shortages. Prices start to rise until you reach a new equilibrium. Decreases in demand cause temporary surpluses, and prices start to fall until you reach that new equilibrium. So we know what happens to the equilibrium. We know what an increase in demand does to quantity and price. We know what a decrease does to quantity and price. And now we know why it does that and how it does it. So I hope this video is instructive. Thanks for watching.